We're going to talk about why having your business sell ready is so important, the threats of that and the risks of that by some seasoned buyers. And we got a fantastic MC, John Smith, the founder, the boss man at Newcom Today's Trucking. And really our goal today is pretty simple, is to educate you, engage you, and maybe have a little bit of fun while we're at it. So I'll be taking questions after. And I really want to thank you for coming today because, I know you have a lot of options. Going anywhere in Toronto is a challenge. So it's a fantastic place. And I want to make a prediction here before we start. One of the members of Lantern is Keith Pelly, the new incoming president of Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm pretty sure Pelly is going to clean house. And in 5 years, they're going to be Stanley Cup's going to be in Lambton here. So that's my prediction. So who knows? Okay, Meg, let me get this mic. Okay. So let me tell you the MSM story. Okay, so I started MSM in when did I start MSM? Early 90s. After working for Yellow Freight System. They offered me a transfer to the United States. Didn't take it. Started as a freight broker. I had a partner. We built it in 23 years to about a $75 million company. We were hybrid, one of the first hybrids. We owned trucks. We were a freight broker. And our secret sauce was really we had an LTL service to and from California. I think we were a pretty good company. We won a lot of awards. We were named Canada's fastest growing company 5 times. We were Canada's best managed private company 17 times in a row. Fastest growing company in LA. Best place to work by McLean's. So we really had our act together. We had a fantastic team. I really believe in this business. Sounds crazy, but your employees are most important. Your suppliers are second. And customers are third, because frankly, customers are the easiest to get. I was a very typical, I'm used to wireless mics, so I'm not very nimble with my hands anymore. So I think I was a pretty typical entrepreneur at the time. I worked in the business, not on the business, putting out fires, working the weeds. I measured not what we could have been making. I measured what we were making. We made X this year. Let's move on. I had no thought to tax planning. Like most entrepreneurs, most of my wealth was tied up in the business. I was living paycheck to paycheck, lines of credit, pretty typical of entrepreneurs of up and down businesses. Had a house, had a cottage, but both those were secured for the bank financing. So like a lot of entrepreneurs, lots of sleepless nights. No thought of mortality. No thought of retirement. All I was worried about was getting those shipments delivered every day. No thought of mortality. Back then, you're bulletproof. I'm a trucker. I'm tough. I'm never going to get sick. I'm going to live forever. No thought of what's going into my genes for my family and what am I going to leave them if I pass. That changed in about 2010. I was at the airport heading off to Montreal for a meeting. Ran into an old friend of mine from the CTA board. You might know the name John Stollery. He used to be head of Overland Express, was on the board of Transforce. Pulled me aside and said, your name came up in a meeting. Alan Bedard wants to buy you. Let's talk. I'm interested. Had no idea what I was getting involved in. Set up a meeting with Bedard. And man, oh man, did he ever expose the warts in our business. I never put any thought into selling the business at all and what would make it more attractive. Minute books were a disaster. We had no normalized statements. We had no contracts with customers, no contracts with employees. We had massive exchange risk factor. Instead of billing customers at Canadian exchange, you billed in U.S. funds. A massive exposure. Bunch of minority partners. What had happened in 2008 when the shit hit the fan, and we went from making $5-6 million a year to losing $5 or $6 million a year. We had to pivot, and what we did is, and we had a bunch of sales reps that were doing very well, making money. We started a minority business with them. So we had 7 different businesses. We had we started a U.S. domestic business, a trailer storage business, an overseas business, and they're all doing really well. But now I got 7 partners that I didn't realize that I had to unwind. So it really exposed, it was a real kick in the teeth. So he offered me a 2 times multiplier, which would barely pay my wife's visa bill at the time. So, but it was a real eye opener, because it's the first time in my life that I realized, like, I got to turn this thing into cash. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm not very good at. I'm really good at trucking, and I'm good at brokerage, but I'm no good at this. But I was going to make myself good. And I also realized one thing, and this really hit me. You only do this once, man. You got to get this right. And I started adding up what it would have cost me if I would have been forced to take a 2 times multiplier. You know what that means? 5-6 years. I'm going to get 5 or 6 year non-compete. I'm going to have to buy Mr. Submarine franchise to pay the bills. So it really woke me up. So I spent the next 2 years on an absolute mission. I mean, a mission. We got rid of hundreds of trucks to make ourselves light asset. We got the minute books cleaned up. We got the receivables cleaned up. Didn't do the right tax planning, but I did some tax planning. We started getting all our contracts on customers. We did annual renewal dates. We really built a better business, and we started making a lot more money. But it was a much better business. I felt more comfortable. I actually felt that we were sell ready. We were doing normalized statements on a monthly basis. And I really realized, and I learned this from a guy named John Worrell, who's actually a member here. He's runs a company called Build to Sell, that when you're sell ready, the one advantage you have, and I'm not going to steal the thunder of this afternoon, but when you're sell ready, you can accept unsolicited offers. Because when someone knocks at your door, like when Bedard knocked at my door, it took me 2 years to get ready. When you're sell ready, someone knocks on your door, you're ready to go. And when they're looking at 7, 8, 9, 10 targets like people are, you're going to send a strong message. So anyways, fast forward 2 years, but 2.5 years later, I was sitting, my son was a hockey player, and I was sitting in the coffee shop talking to his agent, and a friend of mine named, you might know Doug Tozer from Wheels, walks by. Henry, you know Doug. We won't tell any Doug stories. No. He said, Mike, so I'm sitting there having a coffee shop at Humbertown Plaza up the road here. He said, Mike, I just went public. We want to make a statement. I want to buy MSM. I said, let's go. I'm ready. Let's bring it on. Because while this was going on, I also had a partner, fantastic guy. Henry and Dan know him well. Great guy, but he's kind of mentally checked out. I was worried about growth because, once you stop growing, you die. If you don't grow, you die. People check out. And so I was like, man, maybe it's time to cash my chips, because he had a lot of family members. Maybe got to cash out. So Wheels had gone public. It's like, let's go. 9 months later, we sold the business for 6 times multiplier, all cash, no earnout. We had millions in extra cash that we were able to take. They leased their property for 10 years, and I walked out the front door. Now, I did have a 5-year non-compete, which I really didn't give a shit about because I was retiring anyways. And so all good. Mike's happy. Family's happy. Let's carry on. 52. Let's pack it in. That didn't go very well, but I'll get to that in a second. So a couple things I just want to share, and this is more the afternoon part for sure, because these people are way smarter than I am up here today. But a couple things I did learn with being sell ready. Number one is you never have to sell. You know why? Because when you're sell ready, the business runs itself. So in this process of getting ready, I'd established 10 KPIs: receivables, on-time service, cash in bank, customer complaints. I woke up every morning, 10 numbers. Numbers are good. Make puppies all week. Didn't have to work. So I learned that. What I also learned is that when you're sell ready, you never have to sell. You can say no, 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 no. I said no to Doug Tozer. Was a great guy, but he's a lousy negotiator. It was his first acquisition, and he told too many people what he's doing. And he said, I said no. He said yes. I said no 100 times, and I think I made one concession because I didn't have to sell. We had built a business. As much as I was concerned, not as Bob the person, but as Bob the partner, I just said no. And the last thing I learned, and this was through a story I won't get into, but when you're an entrepreneur, the one thing that you can't control is what I call the dreaded D's. Control everything else. Well, maybe you can't control Trudeau, but that's another story. But the dreaded D's: death, divorce, disease, or I call it a dork partner. Because ironically what happens is, unfortunately what happens is most exits aren't planned. They're forced by circumstances. They're forced by circumstances. We try and convince people to plan it, but it doesn't happen. People, it's not the right time, it's this, it's that. The problem is when you get hit with one of the dreaded D's and the business is not sell ready, the value of that business plummets to something crazy, and you leave your family with an absolute hornet's nest. A hornet's nest. I think to myself, at the time I was 52, and hey, people get sick. The mess I would have left my family in if I'd left them MSM after the Bedard offer. Like Danny's cringing. It would have been disastrous. Too many cards here. Okay, so life's good. Life's good. Never had any money before. Bank account's looking pretty good. Wife's happy. She wasn't happy with me hanging around the house. That's not her story, but things are good. And so I realized I have to go back to work. I can't retire. I didn't have any hobbies. I was losing my mind. So I won't bore you how Left Lane started, but I was fortunate enough to meet Pete when I was working at Wheels. We became friends, worked together. When I started Left Lane, I realized how many mistakes I'd made. In particular, when we started insisting on sellers that you do valuations, we do valuations on people that are 35 to so they'll make the same mistake that I made. I realized how much money I left on the table. And then I was pissed because I thought I was in euphoria. I nailed this. I got it right. And I actually made two mistakes. What I should have done when I got the unsolicited offers, I should have hired an investment bank like Left Lane to create deal tension, to bring in other parties, to even negotiate higher with Wheels. But I think I did pretty good because I was able to say no. But I realized that by not doing a valuation, it cost me millions, and I mean millions. And I'll talk about this today because the whole point of this lesson is for you to go away saying, I don't want to make those same mistakes. And that's exactly what I'm telling you. I'm not lecturing, I'm telling you the story because it's okay today. It worked out really well. But I'll tell you, I was kicking myself for quite some time. When we started doing valuations, we started insisting on valuations and starting realizing the benefits, the what actually goes in your genes when you understand what your business is worth. Now, just before I introduce somebody who's going to talk, a great friend of ours, who's going to do a little bit of talking on some of the I know enough about accounting to be dangerous. So we've got one of our great partners here to talk a little bit about some of the accounting aspects of valuation. Let's just deal with sort of the elephant in the room, which is what your company's worth. What your company's worth. I can tell you one thing, it's not worth what your accountant tells you it's worth. That's for sure. It's worth what someone will pay for it. Plain and simple. People always ask me, what's the multiplier? You know, I ask back, what's the value of a house in Toronto? There's no, Megan's laughing, there's no template. Every business has got warts. There's no perfect timing. And it's important to understand that you don't control what it's worth. What you control is how much cash that produces. And that's ultimately what people buy. I was at a meeting in the East Coast last week with a dear friend of mine. He goes, it's bad timing. The guy's got a, massive trucking company. There's no such thing as bad timing. So just important to understand that this notion of worth, we're going to discuss a little bit today, but it's ultimately worth what people pay for, and the strategies you use to sell it. So I can introduce you to valuations and really talk here about, excuse me one sec here. Talk about, at the beginning, what's a valuation, sort of valuation 101, tax 101. I'm going to call on our friend Megan Mistry from BDO to talk to that. By the way, Megan, happy birthday. It's Megan's birthday today. I wanted to sing happy birthday, but Pete wouldn't allow me. So just to let you know that when we realized that we needed to set the valuations first, we had to do this for a whole bunch of reasons. We realized that we need to have a partner in this. This is an expertise. Your accountant can't do it. It's a designation. So we have a very unique partnership with BDO. We developed a product that is very supply chain centric. It eliminates all the fluff that's not needed. We've got track record with multipliers, normalization, so it works absolutely fantastic. Megan, who's been at BDO 14 years, is her partner in valuation modeling. Is kind of you're the linchpin, kind of like. She's the boss. So Megan is here to talk at a high level on valuations, taxation, and she'll set the tone for the rest of the conversation. There you go.
Thanks, Mike. Sure, yeah. So hi, everyone. Thanks, Mike. That was so insightful. And as an advisor, I'm always on the other side of the desk, so it's really nice to hear those comments. I can't tell you how many business owners have come to us and when they're forced or pressed to sell. And I can't stress enough how important it is to be proactively planning for your sale and to engage the right professional advisors to help you maximize the value of your business and maximize your after-tax profits, because that's really what counts. It's what cash you're gonna take back home with you. So I'll talk a bit about the two kind of considerations that you're going to need when you're planning to sell your business. One is valuations, and the second would be tax planning. Just a bit of a caveat, I'm not a tax professional, but I know enough high level, and BDO has a host of tax advisors that are more than willing to help out. So we'll start with valuations. So Valuations 101, what is a valuation? Really, it's a notional indication on what your business is worth. And it's not only important to give you an idea of what you can get in the market, but as Mike mentioned, it's also really important to identify those warts and hairs in your business that you could tweak to maximize value. So we'll talk a bit about normalization adjustments later on, but there are tons of items that are flowing through your business that might be decreasing the perceived value of your business. So when you go to market, you're not really getting what your business is worth. You're not really getting its true, what we call fair market value. In terms of approaches, and I'll go over this really high level, our main approach if your business is making a profit would be what we call a market multiple approach, so an EBITDA multiple approach. And really what that entails is looking back at your historical financial operations, so both your revenue and your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Won't bore you with accounting lingo, but really looking back at that and identifying items or expenses in there that can be adjusted out because they're not reflective of what an arm's length party would incur. So we call those normalization adjustments, and what they are really items that are what we say is are non-recurring items in your business, or personal items or discretionary items, or items that aren't at market rates. So common examples would be, say, meals and entertainment that you're running through your business personally, that are a personal expense and not a business expense. They're bringing your income down, but they're not reflective of your true business expenses. So that's one example. And those items are really important because you don't only get dollar for dollar increases in value when you identify those items, you get a multiplier on that. So say your business is trading at 5 times EBITDA, and you have or identify 100K in normalization adjustments. Now you've just increased the value of your business 500K. So it really does have a very accretive effect on the value of your business. And that's the typical approach we use. In terms of coming up with a multiple, as Mike mentioned, it's not one size fits all. Really, that multiple is there to reflect the risks and opportunities in your business, to look at what you could project out in the future, how stable were your historic profits, and then things like KPIs are very important to your business and really influence that multiple that we select. So in terms of our approach, we take our selected or normalized EBITDA, apply a multiple, and that's your value. And that's really, really high level on valuations. So now we'll talk a little bit about tax planning, and I'm sure you're all aware of the new budget changes, which have caused some discussion recently over at BDO. So one of the main items that have changed or has changed in the budget is the capital gains inclusion rate. And when we're talking about taxes on the sale of your business, we're really talking about how to minimize the taxes you're going to pay. And those taxes are really triggered by realizing what we call a capital gain on the sale of your shares or assets of your business. So that capital gain, now the budget has changed, so the inclusion rate, so how much of that capital gain is going to actually be taxable, is set to increase. I think those changes take place later in June, so June 25th, 2024 is when those changes are anticipated. But the rate has increased from 50% to 66.7%. So that can be a really hefty tax cost on you. Imagine being taxed at the top marginal rate of 50%, and now you're paying 17% more in capital gains. So it's almost a 9% increase in cash taxes that you're going to pay. So it's really important, I would say, if you're planning on selling in the short term, to use some tax planning strategies to capture that lower inclusion rate, so the inclusion rate of 50%, and there are strategies available to do so. If you're planning to sell in the longer term, and we always suggest trying to proactively plan and approach us early on in the game to set up your structures right, one of the most tax effective things that you can do is set up a family trust. And I know Mike's going to talk about that a little bit later. But essentially what a family trust will allow you to do is capture more in what's called a lifetime capital gains exemption. So we each have one. It was $1 million under the current regime, around $1 million. It's going to increase to 1.25 under the new budget rules, which is a good thing. What that allows you to do is it allows you to multiply the exemption that you can apply to the capital gains you're going to realize through a family trust. So I'll give you a really quick example. So say you're the sole shareholder of your company. So it's just you owning all the shares of your company. If you sold your company, say for $5 million, had a nominal cost based off the shares of that company, your tax or your capital gain is going to be around $5 million. Taxable capital gain will be at that 50% inclusion rate. So it's going to be, if you apply that full $1 million in lifetime capital gains exemption that you have, which again will increase, you have now a capital gain of $4 million that's subject to tax. 50% inclusion, $2 million in taxable capital gain at a top marginal rate of 50%. That's $1 million in tax that you're going to have to pay. Now, if you set up a trust and say you have 4 beneficiaries of that trust, yourself, your spouse, and say 2 adult children. Now you can utilize, and you have to have adequate tax planning to do so, but you could utilize $4 million in lifetime capital gains exemption to apply to that $5 million capital gain. So now you're left with $1 million. Taxable capital gain is going to be 50% at the old inclusion rates. That's $500K at your top marginal rate of 50%. You're only paying $250K in taxes, which is still a lot, but not as much as $1 million. So you're essentially saving $750K in that example. So the effects can be massive. And I would really strongly suggest to proactively plan to be able to use those tax planning strategies. And things like that, like especially with the lifetime capital gains exemption, you have to proactively plan because there are some requirements to be able to use it that go back 2 years from the date of sale. So you really have to start early. It can't be a last minute thing. And I always like to say it's kind of like, and I'm sure your transportation folks would know, it's like the last mile, right? You've gotten your business to a sellable state, you've maximized profits, you're growing it, you're doing all the right things, and it's really that last mile that can be so costly if you don't do or take the adequate steps to plan. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll throw it back to Mike.
That was awesome. Thanks, Megan. It's hard to follow that. She's such a better speaker than I am. Well done. That's fantastic. Okay, and if you have any questions, we'll go through them. We're going to save a little bit at the end, but and we had a couple questions that came in prior to the event, and she answered both of them. So thanks very much, Megan. So let's talk about the impact of no valuation. Once again, this came to light years after the fact when I really started understanding M&A, understanding valuations, and really understanding this notion that you only do it once, you better get it right. So first of all, the impact of not doing evaluation. As I mentioned, I was a KPI guy, real measurement guy, measured everything. But I didn't measure the most important thing, the value of my business. And the reason I like measuring, I had 10 things I checked every week. I had a dashboard, is I could get ahead of problems. You see there, how come cash is bad? How come the service is lousy? What's going on? You get ahead of problems before it impacts the customers. I couldn't get ahead of this one because I didn't do evaluation. It's the old deal. You don't it sounds stupid, but if you don't measure it, you don't manage it. So you can say, look at my numbers. Sales is up. We have more customers, blah, 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 blah. But what if your business is down? If you think of our situation, because of Bedard, we had 600 piece of equipment. I got rid of 400 trucks in 2 years. Get rid of them. You know why? Light assets. So by going to light asset, we made more money because I knew. And so just the fact we didn't measure it means I didn't manage our profitability. That should be at every annual meeting, Guys, we had a great year, but our company's worth less. It's a problem if you don't manage it. Second of all, I think if you're doing evaluation, you really get into the weeds. Everything gets unturned. So it's going to make you more profitable. When you're actually looking at these things on an annual basis or every couple of years, we suggest updates, you look at stuff. So I'll give you a prime example. And this one cost me a lot of dough. I don't know if it was for vanity. I don't know if it was for drivers, but we used to turn our trucks over every 3 years. We get new trucks. Pretty good. But these are good trucks. These are Volvos. We drove Volvos, fantastic trucks. Do you realize if we were managing the value of our business and we would have turned the trucks over we would have waited one more year, $3 million in our jeans. $3 million by adding 250,000 miles per truck. You know why? We weren't managing valuation. We didn't do it. So we just went on our merry way thinking that was the best. You really think a driver would have noticed the bloody difference if a truck, the way we maintained them and washed them and kept them, would have noticed the difference in a year? Absolutely not. It cost my family and Bob's family money. As Megan mentioned, tax planning. We did tax planning. We did some. We didn't do enough. By the time we realized it's a 2-hour vest, it's too late. You think of the amount of dough. So I had a couple family trusts. I should have had 5, 6, or 7. I trusted family members enough to do it. Like at the time, I think it was about $800,000. I think it was $801,000 tax-free. So times 4 or 5 other trusts, I think it probably cost me 20, 30 grand to set up. You're talking millions of dollars that once again is left on the table, that's sent for Trudeau to away where it should have been in my jeans because we didn't do the proper tax planning, set up the proper capital gains. I was too busy working in the business, too worried about on-time service, to worry about what really was important. So of course, that impacts the growing of the family wealth. You get to a point where you're working for your kids and your grandkids. You really are. And ultimately, it costs them millions. I didn't manage it. Didn't make the business more profitable. And left family wealth on the table because, this probably gets me in trouble for saying this, but the reason people get into business is to create wealth for the family. And if your name's not on the building, you're an employee and ultimately you want to take care of people, but you're really doing this. You get to the point, you get to a certain age, you're doing this for generations down the road. And, I'm hoping to make it back, but I certainly cost the kids and grandkids some dough. I think Megan did a great job on normalizations. I think the one thing that I wanted to add to that is that because we didn't do valuations, we weren't aggressive enough in our normalizations. And our philosophy, my philosophy, is that you can always add it back. You can't take it away. So I think of the things that we did. Like here's a prime example. And we do this all the time. When you got multiple families in the business, there's some family members that don't do anything, but people leave them on there. You've got we had executive. I think we were making maybe $400,000 or $500,000 a year salary at the time. you could hire sales, you could hire someone to do that job for 150,000. So we really didn't, because we weren't spending time on normalizations, because we didn't do evaluation, we didn't really think about getting the business properly set up. And you just take one employee at 100 grand, at a 5 times multiple, it's $500,000. And you know, when you're talking millions of dollars, like most people in this room, if they sell their business, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but you only do it once. $500,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of cash. And you can't you sometimes lose sight of that when you're dealing with big picture multipliers, but every penny counts because you're not getting it back again. Like you think of the amount of work, you know, you put in perspective, think of the amount of work that, you know, well, 500, you probably only put 250 in the bank, but think of the amount of work you got to do 200 to make $250,000. This one's interesting, minority partners. So I think I mentioned to you, so we use valuations to help people with minority partners that maybe aren't going on the same wavelength. So what happens a lot is that people start a business and they say, I'm going to take the operations manager with me. I give him 15 points, sweat equity. Probably 20 years younger, run the operation, probably become an integral part of the business. So you hit 60, they hit 40, you want to sell the business and they don't want to sell. They can't sell. They have a say in it because they're a partner. What do you do? So we do a lot of valuations. I'll tell you how it costs me money, but just we do a lot of valuations when people come to this crossroad and they want to get rid of a minority partner, because the one thing you will find, and I think Megan mentioned this, a valuation will always is kind of the book way of doing it. Once you involve an advisor, you take a company to market, you create deal tension with multiple buyers. We historically get about, I don't know, Pete, 25? Where's Pete? I think we probably get 20, 25% more than valuations. So by buying a minority partner at a valuation number, you're actually making 20, 25 points on their spread when you go to sell the business, if you do it proper with the right advisor. So I think I mentioned to you in 2008 when the Great Recession, what we did is we started all these new businesses. We're doing well, but they were only up for a couple of years. You guys know Olga Ritchie, we started Forder and all that. And so what we did, instead of valuing their businesses and buying them out on that and putting it all together, we gave them a percentage of MSM that their shares represented. So if your business represented 2% of the overall sales, we gave you 2%. So in retrospect, that cost us a lot of money. We should have used a valuation mechanism to actually buy them out before we took it to market. So once again, and we do that a lot because minority partners really can get in the way sometimes. You know, valuations expose all your financial warts. One of the very first ones we ever did, I think maybe the first one, we were at a company that we were going to take to market. He had no sales reps. I have no sales reps. So we do the valuation. It comes back, $25,000 sales commission. I thought I didn't need sales reps. So I phoned him up. I won't say his name. I didn't think he had sales reps. Well, I don't. Well, what's this 25 grand? Because I don't like round numbers always, see the round number, they always set people off. I lent my sister money for a mortgage. Well, that's fine. You should have told me. You could have normalized that out, but just get me some paperwork. Bugged the guy. Well, I'm kind of lying. I'm actually bribing my biggest customer. We had to walk. What do you mean you have to walk? Well, we're culpable now, and I can't sell this business when you're doing criminal activity. Now, not many people are doing that, but everyone's got financial warts. And what evaluation does is they expose them long before you go to market. Because what happens is, and this is what happened to us, we took 9 months to do our due diligence because of there weren't trouble like that, but we just didn't clean up the books. In our particular, because remember, only 1 out of 3 LOIs close. The last thing that you want is due diligence to drag on because you get what's called deal fatigue, and that's a big problem. In our particular case, they can kill deals. So the valuations allow you to almost do a due diligence every year in your business to make sure it's clean, to make sure there's no financial improprieties, to make sure no staff's up to no good, and really to manage a business. Now, one thing exposed us that we didn't do because we didn't do valuations, we had too much cash. We were sitting on way, way too much cash. And that sounds good. And we kept that. We were old school. We paid cash for everything, no leases, which is kind of dumb when I think about it. I didn't understand other people's money, but we had too much cash. Now we ended up getting that, but it was another negotiation that we didn't have to do, because when you go to sell the business, they want the cash, and they often don't need the cash. In fact, if you have no debt and you're a broker, you don't have to leave any cash, but the receivables. But the point is that by not doing a valuation, we had too much cash, which means we had to negotiate, which meant that Wheels had to they were really good at making concessions, but sophisticated buyers just not rolling over like they are. And they rolled over on this. So it ended up being good, but by having too much cash in the business, it created unnecessary stress during due diligence. And that's not what you want. Rental income adjustment. And so by not doing a valuation, what we did to increase our EBIT every year for the bank covenants, we had to have a line of credit for our payroll, was that we paid ourselves a deflated rent because we own the building. So pay yourself less rent. So when it came time so you think about that's good, because so when it came time to sell the business, Wheels wanted to rent their property for 10 years. So what's the rent? Well, the rent's what you're paying. So we were paying like dirt cheap. Now that was reflected in the deal because it stood on the deal. But I think of the money that we left on the table by not doing a valuation, getting a proper worth, and adjusting the rent, because thank God they broke the lease after 2 years. It didn't cost us. But once again, facility, depending on what you do for facility, the valuation will expose those awards as well. Planning around the last three all kind of meld in. One is planning around pre-tax perks. Megan mentioned normalization. I was a king of that. Trips, lunches, dinners, kids' cell phones, insurance, you name it, I put it through. And there's nothing wrong with that. In a business like trucking, you can do away with anything. But the problem is, when you sell the business, you got to pay all those after-tax dollars. And I had no idea how much dough, probably a couple $100,000 a year, cell phones, insurance, gas for everyone in the family, trips. And so by not doing a valuation, that was a real surprise. And whining was a whole disaster, but just how much my burn rate was after was incredible. The next is sustaining lifestyle. And so we get tons of kids coming. Kids are 4 years old. Mike, I want to sell the business. Okay, no problem. Let's talk. So they come in, they meet me. I always ask them the same three questions. What's your business worth? How are you going to sustain your lifestyle? And what are you going to do after retirement? And what evaluation does, it allows you to make sure that you don't run out of cash. Who wants to run out of cash? Because I'll tell you, you run out of cash in 7 years, you're irrelevant in the business. You're irrelevant. You're nobody after 5-6 years. And so you have to sustain the lifestyle. I see it around, I remember at Lambton here. You know how many guys I see in their 60s got to walk away from this stuff because they run out of cash? This is when you need places like this. You need community. And you can't run out of cash. So that's something. I talk more people into not selling their business than selling their business, because you have no idea, especially in Canada today, how much cash you're going to need if you got kids that you got to deal with. And most of you are. The next is dividend investing. I wasn't ready for having money in the bank. I never had any cash. No one's got, like people in this room, no one's got cash, but most of our business money's tied up in our business. I didn't understand dividend investing. I barely knew my investment guy. And when I sold the business, I gave him all the money. I'm like, I'm not making any money from this guy. So I was sitting actually at an airport with some trucking buddies of mine. I didn't understand what dividends were. I knew what they were, but I didn't understand how they impacted. Well, after listening to these guys, I switched all my business, and I should have done that ahead of time, because it took me about a year to realize that this is not working. I didn't realize that once you get any form of cash, you don't have to touch your stack. You get $5-6 million, $3 million, whatever. You can live off dividends. So it cost me a year of 1% returns. And today, my God, you can get 6-7 points. Dividends is like cash, and it's not going away. And last but not least, is not getting the business value. I was never in that what's next mode. What's next? What's next in my life? Because you think it's really cool to wake up with no purpose. It's not. It's not. And you think, oh, I just come golf at Lambton every day. You know what that means? In the bar after, your buddies playing cards. Like I had no hobbies. I coached my kids in hockey and worked, and that's it. And so there's not a hard number on this, but I'll tell you, I tried to pack it in 52. There's no way that you go from going full bore to nothing. It's a big problem because I didn't do evaluation. So I guess just in concluding, because my time's almost up, and we'll take a couple of questions. The one mistake that a lot of people make is they go, this stuff's great. I'm going to get in the car and call my accountant. That's a mistake. And I'll tell you why. Because first of all is that your accountant should have dealt with this a long time ago, and they haven't, and anyone can react. And I made the mistake of relying on my accountant after my brother-in-law. And I felt a lot of this should have been done, but I take responsibility for myself. It never been done. Accountants are not evaluators. They don't know business well enough. They count numbers. So it's important that you get professionals to help you with this, that people know what they're talking about. Number one. Number two is there's no time. The earlier you start, the better. The earlier that knowing and managing the value of the business, earlier you do that, the more successful you'll be as a company because you'll make more money. Plain and simple. There's no doubt in my mind that I won't tell you the numbers. I'm going to make it back, but I left way too much money on the table. And I think ultimately you're in control of that, and it's the one thing you can't control. So I hope you learned something today. It's great speaking to you. I really appreciate taking the time, and I've got time for either Megan or myself for a few questions before we grab lunch.